You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode is about why you should believe your toxic in-laws. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, welcome to this week's episode. I am your host, Miriam Susan, and today we're going to be talking about something that maybe you're not expecting me to say, and it is about why you should believe your toxic in-laws. So today's scripture reference is from the book of 1 John, chapter 3, verse 18, and it is from the New Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition, and it says, "Little children, let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action." Maybe you had a time when your mother-in-law just told everyone at your Sunday dinner, your weekly Sunday dinner that the whole family gathers at, just how much she loves and supports you. Maybe how grateful she is that you married her son, how thankful she is that you're her daughter-in-law, right after she spent the week undermining your parenting decisions behind your back. Yeah. So when those things happen, which version of your mother-in-law should you believe? Should you believe her words, her flowery words in front of the entire family, or her actions? And you can probably tell by how I ask that. You know what I'm going to say. You definitely need to believe your in-laws by their actions. There is a paradox in what I'm talking about today, that yes, you should believe your toxic in-laws, but not in the way that they want you to. And what this really means is that I want you to believe what they show you through their behavior and not what they tell you with their words. Because toxic in-laws are often very masterful at saying the right things while doing completely different things, depending on the audience. There were many times when I was bestowed accolades and praise and flowery words in front of other family members. But when I had a chance to take a step back and to think about the things that were happening rationally and not in the moment, I could see that that's all those things were, is they were just words. And even actually, just to throw another twist in there, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law could say that they did do a lot of kind things for us. One of the houses we moved into, my mother-in-law and my sisters-in-law, they came over and they painted until super, super late. And I am extremely grateful for that. I'm very grateful for all the many things that my in-laws have done for me and for our family. But it almost felt like this was just something to put on the balance sheet in their favor, so that at some point in the future, they could draw against it. So when you start believing your in-laws' actions over their words, you will stop getting confused about what's going on and start to see things clearly. And again, many toxic in-laws will use the flowery words and then stab you in the back, but others are much more crafty, and they will also do some very nice seeming actions, but they always feel like there's a string attached. What are your toxic in-laws actually telling you? Well, when they say they just want to help, but then consistently ignore your boundaries, what they're actually saying is your authority doesn't matter to them. Your autonomy doesn't mean anything to them. You are not your own separate entity. You are but an extension of them, and therefore your boundaries don't matter. If they claim to love you like a daughter, but make subtle digs at you when your husband isn't within earshot, they're showing that what they say is just for show. They're doing it so that everybody else in the room can hear these lovely things and think the world of them, so that when you speak up and when you say you don't want to do something, you look like the bad guy. When your in-laws insist that they're not interfering, but they're actually undermining your decisions, what they're demonstrating is that they don't respect you as an adult or as a mother. They just see you as somebody who's in the way of them getting whatever they want. And then we have the flying monkeys. We have to pay attention to how they rally people around them to their cause. And if you're not familiar with the term flying monkey, it comes from the movie The Wizard of Oz, and how the Wicked Witch of the West had these flying monkeys. They were basically her minions, and whatever she said for them to do, they would go and do. Basically, they would do a lot of her dirty work for her. And so a flying monkey in your family could be maybe an aunt, maybe your next door neighbor. Maybe it's your mother-in-law's best friend or your father-in-law's best friend from high school. And whenever you see them, they will act on your in-laws' behalf. And what happens when you see your in-laws gathering this crowd around them to be on their side? It shows you what their true character is. It shows you that they are more concerned about how they're being perceived by others than they are in having a loving, healthy relationship with you, their daughter-in-law, and in turn with any grandchildren that are in the picture. Why is this so confusing? Why is it so confusing when we see our in-laws and they shower us with praise publicly, but yet they ignore our boundaries in private? Why is that so confusing? Well, because we're good Catholic wives. Now, I say that as a generalization because obviously there could be a bad, quote-unquote, Catholic wife listening to this podcast. But for the most part, those of us who are in these toxic dynamics, we've been taught to see the best in people and to give them the benefit of the doubt. And this is something that our husbands are probably very well versed in, giving somebody the benefit of the doubt, overlooking their transgressions, overlooking any flaws that they might have, to just see the good in others. But that can be used as a manipulation tactic because toxic people are especially skilled at using our kindness against us. And I am the recipient of my in-laws using my desire to always be truthful against me. Back in 2018, my husband was gone. He was at a job with a Department of Defense contractor in the Middle East, a hazardous job, and it was Christmas. And the whole day, I really did not want to reach out to my in-laws. I didn't, because it was never fun talking to them. They didn't really reach out to me to find out how we were doing unless there was something they wanted. So I didn't want to call them on Christmas Day. But my conscience got the better of me, and I felt guilty. And I thought, well, I should at least call them and wish them a Merry Christmas. So I arranged to make a call. They wanted to do a video chat. I said no, because video chats are always very stressful. I don't know how anybody does a video chat with a bunch of people, especially a bunch of kids. But anyway, so I turned down the video chat and I said we would just do a phone call. And before I made the call, I made a list. I made a list of things that I could say to keep the conversation on track, because I didn't want the conversation to go sideways and have my mother-in-law pull out information from me that I didn't want her to have. Because at the time, our oldest daughter had moved out. And she had not just moved out, but she had moved in with my mom. And so I knew that would probably be a bit of a sticky point with my in-laws, because they seem to have a certain level of envy or jealousy towards the relationship that my mom has had with our children. So I didn't want to share that with them because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And so I wanted to make sure that that did not come up. So I had this index card. I gave them a call. The kids were around, and so they could say hi and Merry Christmas and all that kind of stuff with them. And I went through my little index card, bullet point by bullet point, just keeping the conversation flowing, not allowing for a lull. And then it happened. Right before we were about to hang up, in comes the zinger. My mother-in-law asking if our oldest daughter was living at home. And I said, no, she wasn't. And then the next question came, is she living with your mom? I am an honest person. And she knows that. And she knows that if she asks me a pointed question like that, I will give her an honest answer. And so I said, yes. And I cannot tell you how often I have beat myself up over falling into that trap. Now that we've had some distance from my in-laws, I've figured out ways to answer that are honest, but also do not share information that's not mine to share. And so I could have answered in a different way and said, you know what, that's not my information to share where she is at. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. That's what I could have said. But that was a manipulation tactic. She knew how to use my honesty against me. So when these manipulation tactics happen, when our toxic in-laws use our honesty, use our kindness, use whatever it is, whatever good virtue that we have against us, our gut knows that something is wrong, but their words sound so reasonable. It does sound reasonable to answer my mother-in-law and let her know that my oldest daughter was living with my mom at the time. But she used it against us. She used it against my daughter. And after we moved, my mother-in-law used it as a way to harass my mom and try to find out where we moved after we'd moved and not told anybody on that side of the family where we had gone. And this results in a factor of exhaustion because we are constantly trying to reconcile the words that they've said and their actions. And it is so unbelievably mentally draining. So there is a sense of freedom that you can have by, quote, believing your in-laws. So what does that mean? It means believing their actions and how they treat you and not the words that they say, or even the actions that they do if there's always strings attached. So this freedom allows you to stop making excuses for them. There's freedom in that. There's freedom in understanding that their actions speak louder than their words. And it brings clarity because now you can begin to trust your own perceptions. You're not gaslighting yourself. You can believe what you are made to feel like. You can believe those little jabs. You can believe all those little subtle things that your in-laws do, or not so subtle ones. If your in-laws are more overt in their actions instead of covert, you can start believing that and stop gaslighting yourself. So how does all of this affect your responses? How do you respond to your in-laws now that you are believing them? Well, you can start responding to who they really are instead of this fake person that they are pretending that they are. Because many toxic in-laws, their most important thing is their perception, their social credit, their reputation. And if you start responding to them based on how they actually treat you and the motives that you've seen and have been revealed based on how they treat you, then you can start to understand that, okay, I'm not really dealing with the world's best father-in-law. I'm not really dealing with mother-in-law of the year. I'm actually dealing with somebody who's very hurtful, who wants to be enmeshed with our family and who thinks of us as just an extension of them. And so now that I understand that, I can respond accordingly. I can respond with a firmness in our boundaries, knowing that our boundaries are here to protect our family. Our boundaries are here to differentiate us between our in-laws' families. And that means we can start to experience some peace that we so desperately desire, because there's no more mental gymnastics trying to figure out if you are the one overreacting, because you know who they are. So if you know who they are, if you know they are these toxic people who love to make you look bad in public, who love to pretend like they love you unconditionally, but yet they really don't, then you can have a peace and know that you're not overreacting, you're not too sensitive, and stop gaslighting yourself because you actually are seeing things how they are. So, going back to our scripture reference for today from 1 John that says, "Little children, let us love not in word or speech, but in truth and action." So, just as 1 John reminds us that true love is shown through actions, and I would say truthful actions, just like the scripture says, because like I said, your in-laws might be very similar to mine in that their actions were not truth. They weren't doing things out of necessarily the goodness of their hearts. They were doing things to put things on this balance sheet so that at some point they could cash out and use what they had done against me to try to manipulate and control me and my family. So we have to remember that true love is shown through actions, not just words. And we need to evaluate our relationships based on the patterns of behavior that we see. This week, what I want you to do, if I can give you a challenge for this week, I want you to pay attention to the gap between what your in-laws say and what they do. And I want you to trust what you're seeing because your perceptions of what is going on are valid. They're valid. And I want you to also, if you want to go just a little bit deeper, think about why it is hard to trust your instincts when it comes to your in-laws. Why is it hard to trust their actions over their words? Remember, how our in-laws treat us is the most honest communication that we are going to get from them. And you're not crazy for noticing that there is a disconnect between their words and their behavior and how it makes you feel. If the things that they do make you feel awful inside, trust that. Think about those good relationships that you have. Think about those people that you know that after you get together with them, you just feel lighter. You feel joyful. And then compare that to how you feel after being with your in-law. Now, I'm not all woo about, feelings and all that kind of thing, but there is something that happens that is different when you're around toxic people versus when you're around people that truly love you and truly want to see and do whatever is best for you. And I think you can take a moment and just think about, when I leave the house of my cousin, I feel amazing. I feel energized. I'm so grateful that we got to spend the time together. I'm thankful for the conversation. It was uplifting, and I feel lighter. And then think about how you feel after you leave your in-laws. For me, it was often that I had a migraine coming on because my adrenaline was so high during the visit because I was walking on eggshells that I would have a crash after the visit if it didn't happen when we were visiting together. Or for my husband, it was always feeling like he was steamrolled or got like a sucker punch to the belly and just feeling awful, like he just was never good enough. And so I invite you to really take some time and think about that. Think about how you feel when you walk away from those different kind of interactions and trust that instinct. Trust your gut that something just isn't right. And I want you to remember that believing the actions of your in-laws does not make you uncharitable. It makes you wise because you are discerning healthy relationships versus unhealthy ones. And the confusion that many of us experience after these interactions with our in-laws, where they say one thing and then they treat us a different way, it's a sign. That confusion is a sign that we are actually seeing clearly. So I understand what you're going through. Believe me, after 30 years, I know what kind of interactions these are like because I've been through so many of them. And so I want you to know that your experiences are valid. I see you. I know that it is so hard what you're going through, and know that there is peace out there. It takes time and it takes a lot of work, but I don't want you to ever give up hope that you can have peace in your immediate family. God bless you. Go in peace. Now that we've wrapped up today's episode, I could really use your help. If this message resonated with you, would you take just 30 seconds to leave me a review? Reviews are how other Catholic wives can find this podcast, and you know how much we all need to know that we're not alone in this challenging journey. Your review might be exactly what another woman needs to realize that she's not crazy. It takes just a few seconds, but makes a huge difference. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. But before you go, I want you to know something. If you're feeling exhausted after every family visit, questioning whether you're overreacting, or if you're replaying conversations you had with your in-laws for days afterward, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. I've created a free guide called 5 Signs You're Not Too Sensitive, What Your Gut is Really Telling You, that will help you to understand why these interactions feel so hard and give you some gentle scripts to use in those moments when you're caught off guard by your in-laws. You can grab a copy at desiringpeace.com/signs. That's desiringpeace.com/SIGNS. You're not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with respect. I'll talk to you next week. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.